It has taken me 9 years to put this experience on paper. 9 years of deciding whether this happened or not, or whether I would be considered a nut job for telling it. It was not until I began narrating these near-death experiences that I realized what I experienced was true. The future things that God, Jesus, and even my dead father showed me have made me a better person along the way. However, it was not always like this. There was a time when I despised the very thought of God and His way of doing things. That is until that day, 9 years ago. September 7th, 2012, started off like any other regular day. I woke up ready for another boring day of work. The only saving grace was that I had my first date in what seemed like years. Her name was Teresa. From the moment that I met her, I knew that she was the one. I had never believed in soulmates or anything like that due to my lack of religion, but something deep down told me she was the one. After I got off work, I called Teresa to tell her that I was headed home to change and would see her at 6:30 for our date that night. I wish that I had known what was going to happen. I would have gone right to her house instead of mine, but the universe and God had other plans for me. After getting home and getting changed, I walked out of my apartment into my car and took off heading towards her place. I called to let her know I was on the way and could not wait to see her. We continued talking on the phone as I updated her on my status. I remember laughing with her at a joke that she had told, and then suddenly, I was in a black void. I could not see or hear anything. There was nothing. I am not sure how long I wandered around the blackness. I began to panic, but eventually I gave up. I sat down and began to cry, wondering how long I would be stuck here and whether I would ever get to see Teresa again. I waited and waited and waited for what seemed like an eternity. Finally, with grief and panic in my voice, I screamed out to God for help. The blackness suddenly faded away and was replaced by brightness, a brightness so full of love that it overwhelmed me. There, standing before me, was my dad, who had committed suicide 3 years earlier. Dad and I were never close, but standing here in front of him, I could feel the love that he had for me. But even though I was seeing him again for the first time in 3 years, I did not know how to return it. I still resented him for leaving us, plus there was the fact that I was stunned to see him here. I of course had questions for him, because even though I wasn't religious, even I knew that if you killed yourself you were condemned to hell. I asked him how he was here, standing before me. He told me that every soul goes to heaven, but they must first go through their own personal hell. What do you mean, personal hell? I then asked him if that was the darkness that I had experienced. He told me that no, that wasn't my personal hell, that I would know what it was when I experienced it. Not being satisfied, I again pressed him. What do you mean? I asked him what all happens in my personal hell. His words scared me. He said that for every hurtful word that I muttered or said to another human being, every sinful deed that I did, it would be magnified by thousands. That the people I hurt in life, I would feel that hurt. I told him I didn't want to go through that. He told me that everyone must go through it before they are allowed to move on. Before I could protest further, the brightness and love faded away, and I was there in my own personal hell. A hell that I had created. I wish that I could tell those of you listening that I was a perfect person, and that my experience in my own hell was a cakewalk. I was not a perfect person, and hell is not a cakewalk. I was a jerk to everyone around me. I became a lot worse when my dad killed himself. I experienced the hurtful words that I had said to my mom, the blame that I placed on her for his death. I was put through the same stuff I did to my sisters growing up, and how I would pick on them and beat them up just because I could. Even strangers that I would troll on the internet for fun. I never realized how much words hurt until they were cutting into my soul. Then came the curses that I placed on my dad after he killed himself. How I swore that I would never forgive him and that I hoped he burned in hell for all of eternity. My soul experienced a burning sensation so severe, it felt like I had been dropped into the sun. The worst part though was when I experienced the loneliness of not believing in God, a world devoid of anything. This was the blackness that I had been in before I called out to God for help. I don't know how long that I was in hell, but by the time I returned to the brightness, I was crying uncontrollably. The amount of hurt that I had put people through had completely broken me. My dad was there when I came out and immediately hugged me, as if to let me know everything was going to be okay. I asked him where he was when I needed him, where he was when he decided to take his own life, and why he left us. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and apologized. He explained the hurt that he had been going through and didn't know how to get out of it. Seeing my dad cry, I knew then it was time to finally forgive him, that the hatred I had for him after hearing his apology was gone, and when I finally muttered the words, "I forgive you," my soul was snatched forward towards what can only be described as the most beautiful place that I have ever seen. I saw the pearly gates, I saw in the distance what I can only describe as a crystal castle surrounded by light. I stood amazed at how beautiful heaven truly was. I was at peace and knew that I wanted to stay. I wondered if after going through hell, if I would get the chance to stay. I heard someone calling my name from the left, and as I turned my head, I saw Jesus. He had bluish-green eyes, brownish curly hair, and a long brownish beard. He wore white. It reminded me of what people wear when they first get baptized, and the only feelings that I had around him were those of joy and peace and love. Jesus didn't speak, but I could clearly hear him telling me that I couldn't stay, that his Father had plans for me. I was still amazed that this person, that I didn't believe in even knew who I was, much less that he had plans for me. I asked him what plans. Jesus showed me everything that God had laid out for me. I saw myself going back to school and getting my master's degree. I saw myself becoming a better person in life. I even saw myself narrating near-death experiences, which gave me the courage to narrate my own. I saw that I would marry Teresa and that we would have 2 beautiful girls together. I was even given their names, Alina and Amelia. As the images faded and I returned to standing next to Jesus, he told me once again that I could not stay and that it was time to go. He told me that he would be waiting to see me again and that he loved me. I awoke in the hospital with Teresa holding my hand. When I asked her what happened, she told me that I had been in a coma for 2 weeks and that while we were talking on the phone, she heard me say some really bad words and then she heard a loud crash. A drunk driver had jumped the median and slammed into my car headfirst. The impact forced the steering wheel into my chest, crushing multiple ribs and my sternum. The doctors are unsure of how I lived through it, considering the amount of damage done. But I knew how I made it. God was looking out for me that day. They were able to rebuild my sternum and my ribs. Teresa stayed by my side throughout 13 surgeries and recoveries. I imagined that I wasn't the greatest person to be around during those times. I did get better, though I still experienced breathing issues. One commenter even pointed out in one video that I narrated that I breathed too much. All I will say is that a titanium sternum doesn't allow you to breathe normally. Teresa and I did end up getting married. I wasn't about to let someone like her go. We welcomed Alina in 2018, and last year during the pandemic we welcomed our second baby girl, Amelia. I thank God and Jesus for allowing me to experience this joy every day of the week. I thank them both for being with me that day when the drunk driver could have killed me. Me, someone that didn't believe in God, they protected and allowed me to live. I know a lot of people are going to say that this did not happen. Truthfully, I don't care whether anyone believes this or not. I know what I experienced. I know the issues that I still experience with breathing from the multiple surgeries it took to repair my chest cavity. There are 3 things I can tell you right now. Heaven does exist, God exists, and I am truly looking forward to the day that I get to see my dad and to talk to Jesus again.